Hello, everybody. It's time for Chapter 2 of Alexander the Great, the master of the ancient world. Um, so, the previous chapter kind of laid the groundwork for his, let's say, origin story. Kind of like a superhero has their own origin story. Alexander the Great has his origin story. He was born to a mom, a woman, but then it kind of revealed something about the culture that he was born into, where the king, uh, Philip, I believe his name was. I don't remember. I have to. Yeah, King Philip of Macedonia. He had, several other wives. He was born. Now, remember, Alexander was born under, kind of a lucky sign. Like his best horse had won a race, his best general had won a great battle, and now he had a son born. And in those times, a son was what every male wanted, especially a king, as the heir to their throne. But if that son stepped out of line, I'm going to move on to the next wife and see what she has. Number 4 of 7. So, weird ancient culture. Certainly not what we're used to this day and age, right? But chapter 2 is called Dreams of Destiny. The prince gets an education and makes an impression. At age 7, Alexander began his formal education with a tutor appointed by his mother. Young Alexander may not have believed he was descended from the king of gods, but he acted as though one thing were absolutely certain. He was born to be a ruler of mortals. Alexander quickly mastered the art of warfare. He learned to handle the sharp 15-foot Macedonian pike with ease. He rode a horse with skill and used a bow and javelin with great accuracy. He ran so fast that he was eventually asked to compete in the gathering of athletes from all over the Greek peninsula, known as the Olympic Games. "Yes," he replied, "but only if I have kings to run against me." Where's my... Only if I have kings to run against me. Thinks he's descended from gods. If I'm going to assign a character trait while I'm thinking about it, like that, this makes me think that he is very arrogant. He thinks he's better than everybody, right? Alexander was just 11 or 12 when his cool self-assurance caught the eye of his father and a group of Macedonian companions. A horse breeder had just given Philip a tall stallion called Bucephalus. I think I'm saying that right. The royal grooms brought the animal to a field and tried to tame him, without success. Philip angrily ordered the horse to be taken away. Alexander spoke up boldly. "What a horse they are losing, just because they do not know the best way to handle him," he said. Philip and the other men laughed at the young prince's nerve. But as they watched Alexander approach Bucephalus, their amusement turned to respect. Alexander had noticed that the horse was being spooked by his own shadow. Turning Bucephalus into the sun, he spoke a few soothing words. When Bucephalus calmed down, Alexander mounted him and rode with perfect control to the end of the field and back. The nobles burst into applause as Alexander returned. Philip wept with pride. "Son," he said, "you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedonia is too small to hold you." To groom his son for such a promising future, Philip hired the best tutor he could find, the famous Greek philosopher Aristotle. Philip gave Aristotle a fine house in the quiet village of Mysa, 20 miles from Pella. When Alexander was 13, he moved to Mysa to study with the great man. In Mysa, Alexander lived with a group of young nobles, or companions. Many of them became friends and allies for life. His closest friend was a handsome boy named Hephaestion, who would become Alexander's lifelong friend. There's a picture in here, and it has the caption, "King Philip said that no one could tame the stallion Bucephalus, but Alexander would prove his father wrong, and then ride the warhorse into countless battles over the next 20 years. It's kind of a telling of that event there. Alexander grew close to Aristotle and Mysa. Under the eye of the great master, he developed a curiosity about medicine and the natural world. During his campaigns in Asia, he often sent samples of exotic plants and animals home to Aristotle. Alexander also developed a love of Greek literature. He spent hours reading about the exploits of Achilles, the great Greek warrior from the well-known epic poem, the Iliad. Aristotle gave Alexander his own treasured copy of the poem, and Alexander carried it with him for the rest of his life, often comparing himself to Achilles. Both, after all, had supposedly descended from the gods, and both had been singled out by fortune tellers for a life of glory. In 340 BC, Alexander's education came to an abrupt end. King Philip was planning a military campaign, and he needed someone to rule in his absence. He decided that his son was ready for the task. At Philip's command, Alexander returned to Pella to become regent of Macedonia. He was just 16 years old, and this was his chance to prove that, like Achilles, he was destined for great things. King Philip's army. There's a little blurb in the middle here about King Philip's army. Determined to dominate all of Greece, King Philip turned Macedonia's ragtag army into a disciplined, well-trained fighting force. After his early victories, he began sending prisoners of war to work the fields so Macedonian farmers and herders could join the army full-time. Philip's infantry quickly grew from 10,000 to 24,000. At the center of its battle line stood the foot companions, who marched in square phalanxes of 256 men. Their 15-foot-long lances struck opposing soldiers before the enemy could close in for hand-to-hand combat. A regiment of elite royal shield-bearers protected the right flank of the foot companions. These were the best-trained soldiers, chosen for their size and strength. The knockout blow, however, was usually made by the expert horsemen known as the companion cavalry, who flanked the foot companions on both sides. They charged on horseback, using spears and short swords to cut through enemy lines. Philip also used a special corps of engineers who developed state-of-the-art siege towers to batter the defenses of walled cities. The engineers built wooden towers 120 feet high with platforms open to the front. The towers could be pulled next to a city's walls so the archers could fire down on the defenders. Philip's engineers also built catapults to fling heavy iron arrows at high speeds. These devastating machines used a rope wound around a spool, or winch, to crank a firing arm into position. Alexander would eventually improve on his father's design, using twisted ropes to set the firing arm. This increased tension allowed him to hurl heavy stones as well as arrows during his march across Asia. Well, there you go. Bit of a cocky jerk, I'm sure. Sounds like. But if you're being told from the get-go that you are destined for greatness and descended from the King of Gods, then what else do you know in the world, right? Check out what you need to respond to for today's activity, guys.